welcome everybody to North Ogden Planning Commission. I'm Chairman Thomas. I'll be conducting tonight. This is the April 7th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting for North Ogden City, being held virtually on Zoom. We'll begin our meeting with an invocation or thought given to us by Commissioner Barker. And then Commissioner Barker, do you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance as well as Commissioner Lunt is excused tonight?
Sure, I can do them both.
Okay, thank you. We'll turn the time over to you.
Okay. Our Father in heavens, we begin this planning commission meeting. We're grateful for this opportunity to be of service to the city and for those people who will be part of it this evening, as well as ourselves, our public, and ask who may bless us to be mindful who we represent for our purpose for doing this, so to be able to act accordingly and be civil in our conversations. Say his name, Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, rise for the Pledge of Allegiance if you'd like, and say it after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Barker.
You're welcome.
We'll make note that Commissioners Lunt and Webb are excused tonight.
Commissioner Thomas, I'd like to propose an amendment to our agenda.
Okay.
Given that Commissioner Arner might have to leave early, and given that if she does, it would put us one person shy of a quorum and unable for yourself to recuse yourself if you feel like it, I propose we move item 10 to sandwich it in between the consent agenda and the administrative items. That way we can make sure to get it taken care of for the public that have attended, and not have to people that. So I'm looking for a second on that.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjust legislative item number 10 to be moved after consent agenda due to the fact that one of the commissioners may need to leave early, and that would leave us short of a quorum tonight for that item. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will make that note on the agenda adjustment. Thanks, Commissioner Mason, for bringing that up. Let's go ahead and approve our minutes. Consideration and action to approve the March 17th, 2021 Planning Commission meetings.
I found one line in there that I didn't think was factually correct. It's pretty insignificant. It's on page 8. And as you recall, Commissioner Thomas, you were late for the meeting. And so I ended up conducting the meeting, and as my recollection. And then you were also on the agenda. And so we never really handed the ball back to you to be in charge yet. Page 8, it says that Chairman Thomas opened the public hearing for the Majors Mini Farm. And then after that, it says Chairman Thomas joined the meeting, which I believe, I think I opened the meeting. So
that's about when I joined. So
yeah. So
okay.
Again, that is the most insignificant thing ever, but I did note that it's not factually correct.
Okay.
So with that adjustment, I would propose we approve the minutes.
Okay. What about the minutes for March 31st? We approved together. Anything on those?
My motion includes both days.
Okay. Okay. Do we have a second? Okay, Commissioner Nancaro, was that you second?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes, March 17th and 31st, 2021. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. That your aye, Lisa, was approval, right?
Yes.
Okay, I might have jumped a little quick. All right, I will go ahead and read our opening meeting statement. Before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. After the staff report, the item will be open for other speakers. The applicant will speak first and be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following the applicant, any other interested person will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The applicant has final rebuttal time of up to 5 minutes. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, e.g. pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be forwarded to the commission. Speakers are required to have registered their full name on Zoom and will state their name and address before beginning their remarks. If you agree with the previous speaker, then state your agreement to avoid repetitious remarks. Speakers shall address all comments to the Planning Commission. Please silence your microphones until you're ready to speak. All right, I gotta get back to the agenda here. All right, item number 4, ex parte communications or conflicts of interest to disclose. Commissioners, anything on the agenda for yourselves?
Nope.
You know, one time I
Okay.
did feel a phone call one time months and months ago that I talked about in another meeting that I was contacted by an acquaintance of mine asking about if I thought that the land on item number 10, if I felt like that could go to an R designation. And I encouraged the applicant at that point to come to the meeting and express his thoughts. There wasn't an application at the time. I did, however, give him my personal opinion that I felt like it would have to stay in an HP zone at that time. So I did have that communication months ago to someone
Okay.
on that piece of ground. So I don't think has any bearing on anything tonight, but there was a phone call I took kind of out of the blue, so I thought I'd mention it.
Okay. And then I do have a conflict on that item 10. That is neighboring property to my subdivision. As you recall, the property that I rezoned from HP3 to HP2. And just to kind of stay at arm's length, I'm going to abstain from that item, being that if it does change and become developable ground, or however it will affect or coordinate with my property. So
Mr. Thomas, are you going to abstain from voting, or are you going to also step away from?
I'll abstain from the conversation and everything with that. I'm okay to conduct. I just won't participate in the conversation or vote at all. If that's fine, or do you want to handle that item, Commissioner Mason?
I'm fine with that. How does the rest of the commission feel okay with that? Okay. I don't see any opposition to that, Commissioner Thomas, so let's do that.
Okay. And then just be it known, item number 7, I believe one of the people on that application is a partner of mine in another project. So, but I have nothing to do with this project or anything near it. So I'm okay to move forward with that project or that item based on the definition John has given us on conflicts of interest being of the monetary nature. Anybody else have any conflicts or anything they need to disclose? Okay, we'll open now for public comments for something that's not on the agenda. If you're here for the public hearing or an item on the agenda, you'll have time on each item. We allow public to speak. So if anybody would like to speak for something not on the agenda, please raise your hand or type in the chat box now, and we'll make it known. Katie, do you see anybody raising their hand? Or
I do not, Commissioner.
all right, we'll go ahead and move on then, and we will move on to our consent agenda. The consideration and action regarding annexation property located at approximately 1700 North Fruitland Drive, and recommend a zone of R18 on this annexation. Rob? Rob Scott will be presenting this to us. Are you with us, Rob?
Just got to find the mute button, Chairman. So
The number one Zoom problem.
yes, indeed. So commissioners, there has been a annexation petition received at the corner of 1700 North Fruitland Drive. And as a part of that, the city council has indicated their willingness to consider annexation. And so the process is for annexations that the city council holds any public hearing as it relates to annexation. And a precursor to that is receiving a recommendation from the Planning Commission. So in this instance, it's the northwest corner of 1700 North and Fruitland Drive. It's a little over an acre in size. There's an existing home there, and the family is interested in annexing, and then they will also process either a 2 or 3 lot subdivision once the property is annexed. So with that, I examined the general plan as it relates to whether or not this property should be considered for annexation. It is in our declaration, so it's not only eligible, but we've indicated an interest in having it become in the city. The general plan map calls for it to be low density residential, which the R18 is consistent with that. The properties in the area, it's a combination of RE20 and R18 properties. I felt like that it's reasonable to anticipate that this property is consistent with the general plan. So with that, the recommendation then is to consider this and make a recommendation to the city council, and they obviously have the final decision on these legislative matters. So happy to answer questions.
Hey, any commissioners have questions for Rob on this?
So this action both brings this piece of ground into North Ogden City and assigns it a zone, or it's a recommendation to do so?
Right,
Yes.
those are concurrent actions that take place with annexation, and
Okay.
the zoning designation is assigned as part of the annexation.
So I just like a little more careful look at the zoning. It seems fine to me, but do we have a map that shows what the zoning that abuts it is? Because my only thing is that jumping from an R18 to an RE20 is a kind of a rough transition. And so do we know the parcel to the north, is that the RE20?
Those, that's in a county island and it's zoned
Still
A1.
unincorporated? Okay.
Yes.
And then
And
across the
the property to the west, can you see the dashed line? That's the city boundary line.
I see.
So the properties to the west, those are all R18. Properties to the, again, some of that is still in the county. Properties to the south and to the east are RE20. So it's definitely an area that's in transition. So
Certainly. Thanks for the clarification.
you bet.
Okay, the only action on this is a recommendation to the city council.
So it's a 2-part recommendation, one to consider the annexation, and the second one is the zone designation.
I would move that we approve the consent agenda, which forwards a positive recommendation on the annexation and the zoning to the city council.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
and Commissioner Mason.
Yes.
And then I vote yes. So that will move on to the city council. Now we will move to our legislative item number 10, as we've rearranged our agenda tonight. Item number 10, which is Zone Map Amendment 2021-2, public hearing, consideration, and recommendation regarding rezoning property located at approximately 3625 North, 950 East, from HP3 to HP2. Rob Scott will be the presenter, and I will not participate in the discussion. In fact, Brandon, if you wouldn't mind, maybe Commissioner Mason, might you call for vote on this as well? I just as well not do anything beyond that.
Certainly.
So
So
turn time over to Rob.
thank you. So Katie, if you go down to the map at there we go. And I don't know if you can blow that up a little bit or not. So it's a little easier to see. So the on this map, the blue area is the HP2 zone, and the sort of, I don't know, is that magenta or rose? I'm not very good with colors. That's the HP3 zoning. The yellow is R110, and you'll see to the west is the light green, that's HP1. This particular application is for a rezone from HP3 to HP2. The property that was just recently rezoned is south of the proposed rezone. And as such, it contains just under 17 acres. I need to explain something that goes along with this. At the corner of Mountain Road and Dillon Way in the northwest corner, there's a property that's owned by Regency Development. And as a part of that, that was not initially in this rezone petition. So as staff reviewed this, it seemed like that property should be included in this rezone. So I reached out to Eric Thomas as the owner of that property, and also to the applicant, Rick Skadden, and they both confirmed that it would be advisable and appropriate to include that within the rezone. So that's what we have done. Otherwise, we'd end up with an island of HP3, which it's approximately 1 acre in size. So just to clarify that that's how this is being recommended and considered as far as our analysis. So the property, again, HP3 to HP2, this would be a precursor to a subdivision consideration. And as I mentioned recently, that we had the HP2 designation that was approved just to the south. In the HP zones, there's a requirement that specific studies be performed in order to identify any constraints for development. So there's a list of those: geology, hydrology, slope, soils, etc. So the city engineer took a look at this particular proposal in relationship to the previous North Hillside development study. And the city engineer reviewed that study and found that there are no study recommendations that would preclude the rezone from HP3 to HP2. The HP2 requirements are the same as the HP3 requirements, which include these detailed site-specific studies that will be applied at the time of subdivision review. So as part of the typical review of basically all subdivisions within the city, there would be a geotechnical report and any other specific items that we wanted additional study on. So just so you're aware of the fact that at this point, the city engineer is feeling comfortable that we can proceed to go to HP2. So the second thing we do when we review these rezones is we take and make a comparison with the general plan. The general plan map calls for this property to be developed as residential hillside. The property is within the hillside neighborhood. And you'll recall that in the general plan, there are some guidelines to assist the Planning Commission in identifying, are there specific issues with these requests? And part of that review by the Planning Commission is to determine whether or not some of those guidelines are more important than others. So let me go quickly through those. The first one is a definite edge should be established between types of uses. In this instance, the projects that are up there, they're all residential. They may vary slightly with design and density and what have you, but they're all consistent when it comes to that. That's the first staff comment. The second one is zoning should reflect the existing use of property unless the area is in transition. And of course, the property is currently vacant. It's moving to residential. So it's in transition. Where possible, properties which face each other across a local street should be the same or similar zone. Of course, Mountain Road is going to be dividing this property, which is a collector street. But in this instance, the entire property is going to be consistent with the surrounding HP2 zone and border of the HP3 to the east. Let's see, zoning boundaries should not cut across individual lots or developments. In this case, the entire property will be in one zone. The next one, in terms of residential guidelines, is avoid isolating neighborhoods. And again, the zoning will not isolate the neighborhoods. The actual design will be one that will tie the neighborhood together. So require excellence in design. And this will be a straight single family subdivision at this point. So a building permit would be processed for the future homes and any accessory buildings that would meet city standards. And consider a development agreement. No development agreement is proposed at this time. So the summary of your considerations, there's a couple. Is the proposal consistent with the general plan? And secondly, how does the proposal relate to the zoning and land use policy guidelines? Our recommendation as a staff is conduct the public hearing, receive public comment, consider the general plan, rezoning guidelines, and make a recommendation to the city council. Staff recommends approval of the rezone from HP3 to HP2, and the planning commission can find that this application is consistent with the general plan. And with that, commissioners, I'd be happy to answer any questions before you open the public hearing.
Okay, do we have any questions for Commissioner or for Mr. Scott?
If I look at this, it looks like it's kind of a cleanup type zoning. Just kind of clean up what needs to be done anyway. Is that right?
Yeah, I think you could certainly consider it in that vein, yes.
Yeah, given that the area to the north and to the south is HP2, it does certainly kind of seem like that would have been a logical way to put it originally, but yeah. Any other questions for Mr. Scott?
That little, Commissioner, that little enclave that you see in the map that doesn't line up, that is a retention basin, and we will be processing that to be rezoned to be the civic zone. So that line will be consistent from north to south.
Okay, great. I mean, my take on it, cleanup, I mean, we can't always just think in terms of verticality here because, there could be something specific to the topography that, a jut like that would have, maybe been more consistent with the area to the left. I'll refrain my comments from till later, but I don't necessarily see that as the case here. And I am inclined to lean your way, Commissioner Barker, that it's more of a cleanup thing. Okay, do we want to hear from the applicant before we open the public hearing then? Would the applicant care to address us on this? Someone's raising their hand. Looks like it's our applicant. Katie, can you elevate him to speak?
Yes, they're moved over.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for your consideration tonight on this. I do feel like the comments that have been shared are my comment feelings. It's just consistent with the area, the verticality. I know you said you can't always go by that, but it does make it a nice clean line going north and south. It'll connect Mountain Road through the property and adjoining streets. I'm excited to come back with the plot plan that would show the streets to more access from more locations. And I believe by this rezone, we can accomplish good things for the project and also for the city.
Thank you, sir.
Just for the applicant, for the minutes, to make it easier, if you could state your name and address.
Oh, I apologize. Rick.
No problem.
Rick Skadden, 118 East Lowman View Drive, North Ogden, Utah, 84414.
Thank you. I believe that concluded our applicant's message to us. Therefore, I'd like to go ahead and open the public hearing. So we invite any of the public interested in commenting on this item to do so now. And we'll watch for hands to be raised or comments coming in on the chat. And again, I encourage you, if you do have a comment, to use the hand function rather than the chat. We can sometimes get a little more clarity that way. I'm not seeing any comments coming in. We'll pause for just a second. In the absence of any comments, I entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Commissioner Carroll, thank you.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. I personally believe all comments on this matter have been heard. I don't see anyone else chiming in. So all in favor of closing the public hearing? Aye. Is there anyone opposed? I see no opposition to closing the public hearing, so it's closed. Okay. Now, this is a legislative item, meaning we are going to make a recommendation on this. We're being asked to make a recommendation on this. Our other option would be to table it, I guess, in support or in opposition to this. Any comments or discussion?
I'll make a motion that we provide a positive recommendation to the city council to approve the rezone of this property from HP3 to HP2.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion before I call for a vote? My personal thoughts on this, and like I said in my disclosure at the first, I did receive a phone call about this from someone who, I don't know, had walked through, maybe seen a for sale sign. I don't know why this person called me, and they asked if I thought that would ever be zoned residential. And so I looked at it at that point, and just in all, with no knowledge that it would ever be a recommendation or an application, I thought it should be HP2. That was my feelings at the time, and I stand by those. I think they're unchanged. I think this is a valid application. And does anyone feel differently or have other thoughts? Okay, let's call for a vote. Commissioner Barker, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Arner?
Yes.
Commissioner Nancaro?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas abstains, and I vote yes. So the recommendation passes unanimously. And we'd like to welcome Commissioner Thomas back into the meeting and have him conduct the remaining parts of the meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Mason. I totally forgot I was also an applicant on that item. So just so the commission is aware, that piece that got left off is actually part of North Oaks Cove Phase 16 that has been approved already as a subdivision. So it was just that truly was a cleanup piece right there on our side. All right, and back to our regular order of agenda. We're on administrative item number 7. Subdivision Ordinance 2019-15, consideration and action regarding preliminary approval of the Cooperstown subdivision located at approximately 1550 North Washington Boulevard. Rob Scott.
Commissioners, as you are well aware, this particular project has been in the making now for a couple of years, and a precursor to approval of the final site plan is the approval of a subdivision. So this property has gone through the process of being considered for a rezone, and also the establishment of a got to get down here so I don't lose track of my thought processes here. Excuse me just a second. So this particular project, as I indicated, was recently rezoned to the MPC zone, MPC-CT, and there is a development agreement that goes along with it. The subdivision consists of 4 lots. As part of this review, a technical review committee has met back in 2019, and we have an updated report from our city engineer dated March 9th of this year. The MPC zone requirements are incorporated, and this particular review is part of the zone requirements, as well as I've identified the specific development agreement, A01-2021. And since I wrote this, the signatures have been obtained for that development agreement, and the agreement will be recorded prior to it might actually be concurrent with the final subdivision recording as well. Okay, so phase 1 on this project, there's 2 phases of this project, and they're divided by 1500 North Street. To the north of 1500 North is phase 1, which contains lots 1 through 3. Lot 3 is identified as having a commercial building. It'll have a separate site plan review and approval by the Planning Commission. The other 2 lots will have residential apartments, and lot 1 will have apartments, plus it has the amenities, including the clubhouse. Phase 2 is lot 4, which will have residential apartments. This is currently located in Ogden City. Proposed boundary line adjustment through an interlocal agreement is being processed by the applicant to transfer this land into North Ogden. The boundary line transfer must be completed prior to development occurring on lot 4, since we don't have authority to grant approval otherwise. So just be aware of that. I don't see any reason why not to go ahead and approve the entire preliminary so they don't have to come back. But just note that it wouldn't be processed until that boundary line adjustment has taken place. 1500 North will be constructed as a public street and will be extended to Washington Boulevard with a 60-foot right-of-way. You may recall that there's a part of this property that they don't own as it relates to a 51-foot strip that's owned by Walker Theaters. And the city's interest is that the connection go to the east to connect to Cold Springs Village and 1525 North.
Rob, can I interrupt to
course.
talk about 1500 North? Sorry, but while we're talking about that, I monitor these things on Google Earth and all sorts of things as you talk about them, right? And on the west side of Washington Boulevard, we have a 1500 North that's not in North Ogden City, I don't believe, right? And then right across from that would be the 1500 North you're talking about, but then it would connect to what I believe is 1525 North in North Ogden.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Okay, because we've already got a 1500 North that runs through the Washington Estates manufactured homes. There?
Yes.
There's actually okay. So, okay.
So
Are we gonna call it 15?
Yeah, because 1525 North goes to the south and it lines up with the other street, hence we renamed that from 1525 to 1500 North in this project.
Okay, all right. There may be like 10 feet of overlap where we have a 1500 North, 1500 Norths with the same east designation.
So one of the things that we do as part of the review of these projects is we identify the addressing of these properties.
Okay,
So if there's any conflicts with that, then those would be ironed out as part of the final review and approval.
okay, sorry. I wanted to
No
know where
problem.
that 1500 North came. So
Yep,
1500 North will then connect to what is currently 1525 North, but it sways down.
right. There's
Okay.
kind of a transition on that very easterly end of the
Okay,
project.
thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Not a problem. So one of the things that the applicant and the city, we had an initial meeting with the Walker Theater folks. There seemed to be some indication that they would be willing to, the only thing they'd be doing on this project would be signing the dedication plat because it's all street. So we're hopeful that they will still be interested in doing that. But that'll be something that we'll have to try and make further contact with those folks and hopefully they'll consent to that. So also the last thing is that prior to the final approval, a final landscape plan that includes the streetscapes for Washington Boulevard and 1500 North will need to be presented to the Planning Commission. That would be done in a future meeting. They are to be consistent with the approved Washington Boulevard streetscape design and the development agreement. Also, the 1500 North streetscape would be designed to meet the public works standards. So with that, the summary of considerations tonight, does the proposed subdivision meet the requirements of the applicable city subdivision and zoning ordinances? Is the proposal consistent with the general plan? In terms of the general plan, the proposed subdivision staff has reviewed this. We believe we can recommend that it is consistent with our ordinances and the general plan. The general plan map calls for this property to be developed as Southtown mixed use, and the MPC zone is consistent with that designation. So we have a number of recommendations as far as conditions of approval. Most of these are fairly standard, required that this would meet the staff report requirements, the engineer's report, technical review. There's been a geotechnical report completed, and we've been requesting that those geotechnical reports be recorded and a note be placed on the plat so that in the future, if someone wants to read that report, they can access it. We received a will serve letter for secondary water. The applicant will still need to give us a sanitary sewer, Central Weaver Sewer District service letter prior to final. Also, a 6-foot vinyl fence will be constructed around the perimeter of the project. As part of the discussion with the Walker Theater, we still need to communicate to see if they're interested in a gate on the north side of the project. You'll remember it'd be nice to have people not have to drive to the theater. They can just walk through the parking lot. Compliance with the development agreement, the boundary line adjustment prior to phase 2 being given final approval, and the final landscape plan that includes the streetscape design will follow the Washington Boulevard standards and the development agreement. So staff recommendation on this is that the Planning Commission grant preliminary approval, and in the I made a little faux pas here. I was using another report, and now does say the Cooperstown subdivision, and subject to the conditions in the staff report. With that, I'm happy to answer questions.
So, Rob, this isn't the first time we've talked about this piece of ground, not even close, right? And in the
Correct.
past, we've had more detailed layout of, the height of the buildings and the positioning of them and things like that. And it seems like here we have just a general lot layout. What's different here?
So what you're describing, those things are all, the site plan and the attachments were all included as part of the zoning ordinance and with the development agreement. So all of those things are contained therein. So all this is doing is the creation of the lots that would then allow for the project to move forward.
I see. And what's the status on that site plan and MPC
Well,
or the development agreement?
yeah, the signatures have been accomplished. And so as part of prior to the recording or consistent with the recording of this subdivision for final plat, those things would be recorded at the same time.
Gotcha. Well, this does seem like a cleanup item. Doesn't it?
Well, we hope that we're hoping that that's exactly what it is.
Is the site plan, does it come back before us again, Rob, or is that now with the development agreement just handled with the city council?
That's all been done by the city council. So the one thing that will be coming back to you would be the final landscape plan. And that would include the streetscape design.
So just to, that's what I was thinking, just to make commissioners aware, this has been given a positive recommendation, this site, this project from planning commission already. And so that's why it would be handled at the city council, as they requested some changes and those were done on their behalf, but where we recommended a positive, it wouldn't come back to us.
Okay, that's good to know.
It's a long time ago that we did it, but so they've just been working with the city council through it all. Okay, do we have any other questions or comments? We'll give the chance for the applicant to speak to us. I'm not sure who's representing. Is it Danny or is it Rick or who? Rick. Katie, if you'll let him speak, there you go.
Commission, it's a pleasure to be in front of you. As we
State your name and
discussed.
address again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Rick Scadden, 118 East Lowland View Drive, North Ogden, Utah, 84414. We have been working on this project now for 3 years, and I feel like we've went back and forth. I'm grateful to the Planning Commission and also Council for their feedback, and I think the development agreement was reached in a manner of both sides finding the right things for the city and the project, and we're happy with that. We did add some more parking for the commercial building under recommendation, and I feel like we're to the point of now taking the project to fruition and get going on the design, or excuse me, building out the design that's in front of you. Maybe I could answer the question on the building heights and all that are described in the development agreement. So if that helps answer that question that was brought up before. So those heights have been established by the development agreement. And we're just anxious to get going. I think it's a good plan, and I think we've made the changes that the city would benefit from, and also it's good for us as well.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? All right, thanks. I guess before we get to our discussion item, I just invite, is there any public here that would like to comment on this item tonight? I gotta change my screen. Is there, sorry, is anybody raising their hand? I don't see anything, so.
Not at this time.
Okay, well, commissioners, any more discussion or a motion?
Every time we talk about this piece of ground, I'm reminded of a public comment that did come in from someone. You know, we see so much opposition to high density housing and things like this. And I remember a person that I respect, not because I always agree with him, but who lives in the area. But you know, he's been on the city council and things like that. He showed up to speak on this because he lived in the area, and he basically said, "I don't see any other option for this land, and I'd like to see it developed because the alternative of non-development is, I'm paraphrasing, putting words in his mouth, but it's just a place that would invite crime and decay, and he was really in favor of this, and that's stuck with me as we've talked about this over the years. And I know the project's much smaller than I'm sure it is, because I think the mayor wanted it smaller than it was, but that's not being up for discussion. I think what is up for discussion is the subdivision layout, and it seems completely in line with the general plan and with everything that's happening there. So those are my thoughts. I see no reason to not apply this, what is technically, I think, a cleanup to a project that's already in motion and is governed by a development agreement with the city council, where the applicant's working closely with the city council.
Yeah, I think that's important to make note. The project's already been approved and worked through with the city council. Simply, we're now approving a subdivision plat itself, which is basically the 4 lots. Has really nothing to do with the project that's been proposed. That's a separate item and has already gone through. So like you said, this is kind of a after the fact item that comes through. Just to make note of that, I think there was a chat in there that was referring to that. But as far as what's going in this project, you'd have to look at the development agreement or the proposed project when that comes up. Right now before us is simply just this 4-lot subdivision. So barring that, I don't have the drawings in front of us, I couldn't answer your questions on the housing or what's affordable. So
yeah, that's a mathematical, when we talk about affordable housing, there's a definite definition to that, and I wouldn't have that in front of me either. And as far as the other question asked in the chat, is there a limit to how many apartment complexes will be in North Ogden? Well, again, in my opinion, that's driven by the general plan. In areas that we have zoned, where we put maximums on areas, and so you'd have to kind of do the math to kind of figure out what that would be. But I don't know of any limitation on a maximum number of complexes. Instead, what we have is land usage that says, in this area, you have low density. In this area, you have medium density, and there's definitions to that, meaning X number of homes per acre, depending on the area it goes in. That would be my best answer that I'm able to give to that question.
okay, any other discussion, commissioners? I just remind you in a motion that the motion is that would also be contingent on the property line adjustment with Ogden City, or boundary line adjustment for the city with Ogden City prior to final
No,
recordation.
that's in the staff report, if I noticed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's the
okay.
second, it's the second to the last bullet,
Okay,
under the conditions of approval.
Right.
And commissioners, we also have a comment from Rob in the comment chat box. He says the project is a market rate project.
okay. Thank you. All right, commissioners, anything else? I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we grant preliminary approval of the Cooperstown subdivision, subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any other discussion? Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, we'll move on to item number 8. Subdivision Ordinance 2021-16. Consideration and action regarding final approval of the Majors Mini Farm subdivision located approximately 123 West, 3100 North, a 3-lot subdivision.
Before we do that, Commissioner Thomas, you okay if I address some of the comment in the chat? So
Well, that's really related to the project, and what was on our agenda is simply just a subdivision.
certainly.
So
Okay.
we don't know how many units are going to go in there.
Okay, if you don't want to
So-
allow, that's fine. I wanted to address just the nature of the chat and how answering questions becomes difficult there, especially when it doesn't flow. Just so they didn't feel ignored, but that's okay.
Yeah, If they want to bring it up, I guess we can read it at public comments. I guess we do time for public comments after the agendas.
Okay.
Sorry, the Majors Minis Farm Subdivision. Brandon Bell will be the presenter.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. So this is, again, it's Majors Mini Farm Subdivision. It's already received a preliminary approval. And it, again, is at approximately 100 east and 3050 north. The project area is approximately 1.78 acres. The current zoning for the project is R110. Most of this land is currently undeveloped. And then, so the applicant has also, they've been through a technical review meeting. In addition to preliminary approval, we've received a review memo with conditions for approval dated March 24th of this year from our city engineer. We have a geotechnical report for the subdivision and a will serve letter from Central Weaver Sewer, as well as for secondary water for the subdivision. A note does need to be added to the plat referencing the company report number and date of the geotechnical report. A special exception for this subdivision was determined to be needed to be considered. It was recommended for that special exception regarding the cul-de-sac length by the Planning Commission at the March 17th meeting, and then that special exception allowing an extension for the cul-de-sac length was approved on March 24th. And that special exception provided for adjustment to the length of the cul-de-sac in the final design, which the applicant did make a very minor adjustment. I think it was less than a foot in the final design, just to accommodate some other conditions that had been recommended in preliminary approval for the subdivision. The lots in the proposed subdivision have been reviewed and to meet the lot width and area requirements for building lots in the R110 zone. The applicant has verified specifically on lot 1 and lot 4 where staff had some questions on the lot width, and then and they've also verified that the distance of the home and the awning on lot 4 meet the required setback distances. As we've discussed in a prior meeting, as well as with the applicant, that homes constructed on any of the lots in the subdivision will need to be located 30 feet from all the property lines that are determined to be a front property line. There's a hammerhead design on this subdivision that the city engineer has stated is acceptable to be used, as well as the fire marshal has approved. But one of the trade-offs for that happening is that it increases the number of front property lines, given the design of a hammerhead, the shape of it. And so we've had that discussion with the applicant and have discussed that in a prior meeting as well. There's an existing accessory building at the rear property line of lot 2 that's been verified to meet setback requirements. And they're from the new northern rear property line of lot 2, where the property line's being adjusted. There's also an existing shed that's either on or near lot 4, near the hammerhead. That's anticipated to be in its current location within 30 feet of a front property line being created by the subdivision. And as a result of that, in its current location, it will not meet the accessory building requirements. Staff recommends as a condition of approval that the shed needs to be removed from the property line and moved onto a lot in the subdivision that already has a main dwelling, as well as moved into a location on a lot that meets the accessory building ordinance requirements. As staff discussed this after the written report was completed, we came up with an additional option as part of that recommendation, which is that the applicant's representative discussed with me that They'd like to use one of the lots that they're creating potentially for a garden. And so agriculture is a permitted use in the R110 zone. And so staff recommends that as an additional option for the shed, that the shed may be located on a lot in the subdivision where the applicant is able to demonstrate that they're using that lot for gardening on an annual basis. The applicant should complete a land use permit as part of that to apply for it, to make sure that that condition is met, as well as that the shed would meet any applicable setbacks. The thinking of staff on this issue is that agriculture is a permitted use, but we also have to be careful that people aren't just putting sheds on vacant lots. And so we just would like to recommend that they give some evidence that it's going to actually be used for gardening if they'd like to put it on a lot that doesn't have another structure on it, and do that through a land use permit, and so that we can review any other applicable conditions for the shed. Again, the applicant, the staff recommends that the applicant needs a land use permit to determine a final location for that shed prior to recording of the subdivision, and then an inspection that shows it's been moved to a location that is approved. There's also existing fences on the property, which certainly one of them will need to be adjusted in height. And there's a fence that's currently, I think it's listed in the report as 5 feet tall. It's actually, I think the applicant's representatives told me it was 6, but because they're creating some new front property lines, it will need to be reduced in height to no greater than 3.5 feet within 30 feet from any property line that's been determined or is determined to qualify as a front property line. And the applicant needs to apply for a land use permit for that as well, to ensure it meets these city requirements as staff's recommendation prior to the recording of the subdivision. And again, that can, anything related to the fence or the shed location can all go on a land use permit application, on the same land use permit. And then, so just kind of review some of these recommended conditions of approval. There's the requirements of the North Ogden City Engineers Report, the requirements of the Technical Review Committee letter, a note on the plat regarding the date, the company report number and date of the geotechnical report. Main dwellings that are constructed on any of the lots will need to be 30 feet from all property lines that are determined to be a front property line. The shed that's on or near the proposed lot 4 needs to be moved to a location that either has a main dwelling or where they've verified, provide some evidence that they'll be doing gardening, and that will be verified through a land use permit, so that the applicable standards would be met. That recommendation, again, about the gardening is not in the written report. So if you recommend approval, you want to add that as one option for the shed. And then I think that covers all of the recommended conditions of approval. Staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission grant final approval of Majors Mini Farm subdivision subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report, the engineer's report, and the Technical Review Committee letter. And does the commission have any comments or questions for me that I can help clarify or answer?
Thank you, Brandon. All right, do we have the applicant here tonight? Okay.
Yes, my name is Greg Wall. I'm with Avenue Consultants, and the address is 6605 South Redwood Road, Taylorsville, Utah 84123. And I work for the engineering company that's working on this project, and I'm representing the owner, Jimmy Taylor. And I appreciate the city working with us on this project. This is the third time, I guess, we've met with the planning commission. We did the preliminary plat, and then afterwards we found out that we would need to do the special exception to the cul-de-sac length, which was considered at the last planning commission meeting and approved by the city council. And so we, from the original design of the preliminary plat, we've addressed all of the comments from the engineering department. We drew up the civil plans that included the utilities and labeled all of the setbacks and frontages. The final plat also addressed the comments from the planning department, and we believe that we've got all those. There was the note or the requirement to add the reference to the geotech report, and I actually already spoke with our surveyor, and he has that added to the plat, and I can email that to Brandon. So we did appreciate, with the special exception, the ability to modify that slightly. Our surveyor went out and double checked and found that the road center line was about 8 inches off from our design. So we modified that to align with the existing road and to make sure that we met all of the setbacks. And yeah, I think it's ready to go. I know the owner is excited. And as far as the conditions with the shed, we anticipated having to move that. And Jenny's hope is to be able to use that for garden tools on lot 3, which will, for the foreseeable future, remain vacant where she can grow the garden. And then with the fence, we indicated in the civil plans the existing fences that would need to be demolished, and then any new fences will make sure we comply with the requirements of the municipal code. So I appreciate the city staff and everyone's time that has worked towards this. It has been a little while in coming, but we're excited to hopefully wrap this up. I did want to clarify one item that I just noticed, and that was in Brandon's staff report, the recommendation that the shed be moved prior to the recording of the subdivision. If it's possible, I think it may make more sense for that to be moved prior to the final inspection or the issuance of the certificate of occupancy, just because it will probably be moved by heavy equipment, and the building permit isn't issued until after the recording of the subdivision. So it would be more convenient to be able to move that when the heavy equipment was on the site. But other than that, I think we've addressed everything the city's asked for, and we're looking forward to going forward.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? All right, is there any public that would like to comment on this item? Please raise your hand.
Doesn't look like we have any public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any more discussion or motion?
I just have a question of that shed. Shed being moved prior to occupancy, is that going to require anything different other just in the motion to mention it?
No, I think it has to be moved in order to build a house there. So I think really placing it on the 3 constitutes needing a land use permit for that lot 3 where it's going. I think right now in the subdivision, it will be moved in the process of building a house. So
just leave it as is in the staff report.
yeah, I think that's fine.
Well,
Okay.
so just to respond to that issue and also the comment that was made by the applicant, if they, I don't see a problem with it being the sort of deadline for the shed being moved back to certificate of occupancy for, say, I would say lot 2. But we tied it to the subdivision as opposed to the building permit because the subdivision is what's being considered. If they're okay with that, then that's fine, but we didn't feel like as staff that we should go, assert and go out on our own to recommend that it be tied to the building permit and certificate of occupancy. If they're okay with that, I think staff is as well. I just make the note that, there's not automatic, staff is not recommending automatic approval for it to be moved on to lot 3. We'd like them to demonstrate that they're going to be using it for gardening, so that we're not being unfair to other, people in the city who aren't able to put sheds on vacant lots.
Okay.
Brandon, would you like that land use permit to move it to the gardening lot prior to recording of the subdivision?
If the applicant wants to tie it to the certificate of occupancy on their lot, then that's fine with me. Like that would be a later date because they can't build until they.
Yeah.
Yeah, the issue is putting the shed on a vacant lot. Right now it's on the lot they want to build a house on. So naturally it has to move. But if they were to just move it on the existing lot somewhere else, they wouldn't need to do a land use application and all that stuff unless they want to put it on that vacant lot and do what Brandon is expressing. So I don't think we want to force them to say, oh, you need to do a land use permit in order to, put it on that lot. I mean, it has to be done to put it on that lot. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be done prior to the subdivision. I think it just needs to be made note is if that shed is going to be placed on lot 3, then a land use permit is required to demonstrate that it's for gardening purposes. But when they move it, if it's in the way of the subdivision, then that should be tied to the escrow agreement for the subdivision. And there should be $500 in the bond or whatever to make sure it gets moved for the subdivision as part of that process. And then it's not really related to anything according to a house or anything like that. So
the staff's recommendation is that they should get a land use permit regardless of where they move it in the subdivision. We are just adding that they should, that we're recommending that they also have the option to move it onto lot 3 if they don't, if they want to put it there, that they need to demonstrate that they're going to be doing gardening.
Well, Brandon, does our code allow for accessory dwelling unit or accessory buildings on lots that don't have a main unit?
So it allows for agriculture as a permitted use. So I spoke with Rob about this today, and what he determined is that he was comfortable with it being on a lot where they demonstrated that they were going to be doing gardening as part of agriculture. So.
Okay.
But we need that land use permit, show us that it's going to be used for gardening, and the land use permit would also make sure that it meets setbacks and other things like that on that lot if they move it there.
Have we already recorded this as different lots in the subdivision? Because I'm thinking, what's stopping the applicant from just moving the shed from one, it's all one lot, right? So why couldn't they just move it from one area of their lot to another? It would be a non-conforming, after the subdivision comes in, it would be a non-conforming grandfathered building, right? But they could move it.
We actually have a provision in our subdivision ordinance that says if you have a building that would become non-conforming, you have to bring it into compliance.
Okay.
To subdivide. So
I just feel like we've just rung this applicant on these things, and I'm just feeling bad for him. I mean, she came here and said, I'm a rule follower, but man, we're putting her through the ringer here. And I just like to make that as easy as possible on them from here out.
if the shed's going to go on an empty lot, there needs to be a land use permit.
Yeah.
If it's going to stay on that lot, then it'll be part of their building permit and their plot plan. It'll show where it's going to go.
Commissioners, one of the keys to these land use permits is that then there's an official record of approval that people can rely on in the future. So it really is to their benefit to be able to have an approved land use permit, irrespective of this project or any other.
And if I can make a comment, this is Greg Wall with Avenue Consultants. We're not opposed to the land use permit at all. It's just for convenience, the building permit can't be issued until the plat is recorded. And if the plat can't be recorded until the shed is moved, then the heavy equipment would just have to go there twice. So it's more a matter of convenience. If it's going to make it problematic, we'll just send it out there twice.
I think where the applicant has offered to have it be tied to their certificate of occupancy, I think I'm fine with that. If the commissioners are, is just having that be contingent on something of that matter rather than the subdivision itself, I think that's okay.
I would support that.
I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm fine.
All right, do we have a motion?
I could take a stab at.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so I recommend that we grant final approval of the Majors Many Farm subdivision, subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report, the engineer's report, and the technical review committee letter. Additionally, the applicant needs to submit a land use permit for the relocation of the shed that's currently on or near proposed lot 4, regardless of where they move it to. They need to specifically submit a land use permit if they want to put it on an empty lot, and that has to demonstrate that they're going to use that lot for gardening and agriculture on an annual basis. The other caveat is that the relocation of the shed can be, I guess, approved prior to the certificate of occupancy rather than the recording of the subdivision as indicated in the staff report. Think I got that.
Good job.
And that's good. I'm glad it was you. I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Arner.
Yes.
All right, and I vote yes. So a long time coming, gets its final approval. Item number 9, Commissioner Arner, are you still with us or are you excusing
am.
yourself?
I'll stay. I don't want to put you guys in lurch. It's
Okay.
fine.
Well, yeah, okay. Item number 9. I can't remember what SPR is. Refresh my memory.
Site plan review.
Site plan review. Thanks, Kai. 2021-3. Consideration and action regarding site plan approval of Little Growth Daycare, Masters Daycare, located at 2670 North, 1125 East. Presenter is Kai Johnson. Kai?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. This is a site plan review for a daycare. It is located in an R110 zone near Wadman Soccer Park. The surrounding land uses are all residential, and it is a legislative decision. Because this is a use other than a single family residential home, it needs to go through site plan review. That's kind of what we're here for. As part of the daycare center regulations, it regulates parking as well as square footages of the home. This application, the applicant has provided all of the information and all of the standards are met with respect to parking and number of students on site. She's indicated that for starting up, she'll be having 8 students or children. If she does go above 8, she will be hiring another person. She has also completed all of her state licensing as well as had the site inspected by the fire marshal and has approval from him. The backyard is fenced and frankly, it meets all of the requirements in that regard. I did do a visit to site. The one hazard I would note is there is a drainage that does run along the south of the property. If there is ever water there, it's going to be a kid magnet. But other than that, there's plenty of parking and room for loading and unloading. If the planning commission has any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
Thank you. Just one comment, Kai, you mentioned that this is a legislative, this is actually an administrative item.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
So,
Chair.
thank you. Any questions, commissioners?
I have one for the applicant.
Okay, let's go ahead and, do we have the applicant with us tonight?
We do.
Katie, if you could let them speak.
Can you hear me?
Yep, there you go.
Can you hear me? Oh, yeah, I'm here. I'm Jackie
Yes.
Peterson.
Can you state your we got your name and just your address, Jackie?
Oh, sure. 2670 North, 1125 East, here in beautiful North Ogden, Utah. And I love it here.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Peterson, do you have any general comments for us before I ask you any questions?
Any general comments from me?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes. the
Yeah,
applicant
anything
says-
additionally that,
Yeah.
sorry, anything additionally that Kai didn't explain to us, you'd like to talk further on, or?
Kai mentioned something about the creek that's to the east of our property. The children won't have access to that because there is a fence between the creek and where the children will be. So there won't be a
Okay.
concern with that. The creek only runs a couple months a year, depending on how much rain and snow we get anyway, right? But yeah, there's not a concern with that. I really don't know what to say. I just
Okay.
needed to do something. I've got a beautiful basement, and there you have it. I just decided this is what I wanted to
Let me
do.
try to walk you through this.
Okay,
So
do.
you don't need to say anything. I think it was pretty self-explanatory.
Great. Okay.
So I do have a couple concerns. I noted that you wrote on there that the drop-off will be staggered. How do you intend to enforce that?
A
Or-
drop off will be staggered.
I thought
Oh,
I read in there that there would be a staggered drop-off, meaning all 8 children wouldn't be dropped off at once. Is that a true statement?
I think that is true, because the parents will have to walk them in. So they'll park in my driveway, walk the children through the
Okay.
gate, into the basement area. And that's where they'll sign them in. And then for them to pick up their kids, they have to do the same thing. They have to come down, physically walk down, sign them out, and take the children with them.
Okay. So are they going to park in your driveway for that?
Yeah, it's a big driveway. I don't know if you have.
I'm looking at it on Google Earth. It's huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't have a concern with that because they will be staggered. People, they have different schedules, of course, with their work, right?
Okay.
So,
One of when I reviewed this earlier before the meeting, one recommendation I was going to make was that parking not be done in your driveway, because I've lived in a cul-de-sac and I know how close together those driveways get. And I was going to suggest that parking not be done in the driveway and just they drop off at the curb. But I don't think that works with your with your desire to have the children walk in.
I
So, okay, so I think that alleviates my concern. If the children are walking in with a parent, I think I'm okay with cars in and out of the driveway.
or they could just park right along the front of the house there. That would be fine
Yeah.
too. If that's what you'd prefer, I could tell them to do that.
I don't necessarily know, as that's a concern for me. My concern was that you'd have 3 cars in the driveway at one time. Somebody would be backing out and someone would be dropping off at the curb, and you'd have a little 2-foot-high person as someone's possibly backing out of your driveway. And
Oh,
that
sure.
did present a concern to me. So, and so I was going to recommend that drop off be curbside only.
Okay.
However, I think with your condition of escorted, I see why you want the parents to walk them into the door, and I think that overrides my concern with the parking. So,
Okay.
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 So I have
thank
no further questions.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Well, if not, thank you for your time.
you. All right. Thank you.
Jackie, is that right?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. All right, commissioners, any other discussion on, I guess, open this up for public comment. Is there any public here that would like to comment on this item?
There doesn't appear to be any comments at this time.
All right, thanks. Commissioners, entertain a motion.
We approve this item with the condition that that entrance to the daycare be either by the parent if the car is parked, or with curbside drop off. Either or. I don't know. Does that never mind. I'd like to withdraw that. I don't think that makes sense. I'd just like to
Okay.
approve this item. Because I don't want to have
Yeah,
some
but-
people dropping off at the curb. Well, some adults still backing up. So I don't think that makes sense.
Okay, we have a motion of approval, and do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any other discussion? Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, so that receives its approval. All right, we made it through all our voting items before 8 o'clock. Commissioner Arner, if you'd like to excuse yourself, you're more than welcome to. If not, we'd love to have you for the rest.
Oh,
Our
thank you.
last,
They are
you.
not quite here yet, but I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
well, if they are and you step aside, just excuse yourself and we'll see you next time. Let's
Thank
move
you.
on to item number 11, Zone Text Amendment 2018-10, discussion regarding amending the city code to establishing streetscape standards. Presenter is Kai Johnson. Kai?
Thank you, Chair. Katie, can we bring up the cross section I sent earlier today, please?
Are you seeing that on the shared screen right now?
No, ma'am.
No.
Okay. Back out of it and try it again.
So while she's bringing that up, this is really to kind of tie together the field trip and discuss a couple of options with respect to kind of a template Lauren has provided, the city engineer. There are a couple of things that don't necessarily work. Actually, I'm going to get Tiffany, the Parks and Recreation Director, to participate as well. So this cross section, can we zoom in a little bit, Katie? Thank you. This is 81 feet of right of way, and with a 6-foot meandering trail along the would be the north side of the road. So kind of with respect to this option, Parks wants a 10-foot trail, which would extend further into the PUE and pedestrian easement. There's also the option of eliminated parking on one side of the road and extending the trail into the road. And there's also the option of adding a planted median. Robin, can you help me out here? I want to make sure I'm covering everything.
Yeah, thanks, Kai. Commissioners, before we bring this back for your consideration and a recommendation to the council, we wanted to just describe the things that were discussed on the field trip, and then just see if there are other items that you want us to consider as options. So this is not a decision item tonight. We wanted to identify those things that we talked about on the field trip, and then we'll do an assessment with both Public Works and with Parks and Recreation, and then provide options for you so you can make a recommendation to the city council.
Okay.
Can you describe the pedestrian easement? That's the extra 20 feet there. Am I reading that right? Are we talking 100 feet with the pedestrian easements?
No, we're still retaining the 80 feet of right of way. That's not changing. The question that one of the options that was presented on the field trip was to do encroach into the PUE on the private property, similar to what we've done in the past. There have been some trails that we've gone 1 foot in and created an easement for that 6-foot sidewalk. So in this instance, the trail that's being recommended, consistent with our standards, would be a 10-foot trail rather than a sidewalk on that north side. So the question is, what's the best way to accommodate that? We're not prepared to make a recommendation tonight, but we identified a couple options for you. One is to do the meandering sidewalk and to encroach on that PUE. The other option is if we want to maintain the existing right-of-way, another option would be to remove the parking on that north side. So like I say, we're trying to identify options, and then we'll come back with a more detailed staff report for your consideration at an upcoming meeting.
I have a question. If eliminating parking on one side, do you have a specific side to be looking at?
Not necessarily, Commissioner. That's a good question. It could be either side.
Well, the reason I make that comment is because, like, when I pick my grandkids up, I hate the thought of them crossing a road regardless, even if it's a quiet street, because you never know what little kids at 6 years old are going to do. They take off and they're just so impulsive. And so if you only have parking on one side and have the other opposite side where the house is, it could, like, see, it create a safety issue.
So that's a good point, and that's something that we would identify as either pros or cons with respect to that. So, I mean, another option is to consider the travel lanes that are there. And you have the bike lane in that. If someone's just doing a drop off or a pickup, to have that be someone would stop along the side of the road, probably would not inhibit. Might slow traffic down for a second while somebody picks somebody up, but it wouldn't be a major issue.
It's just a thought.
Yeah, it's a good thought.
Well, I'm still of the opinion that whatever we want to do as a cross section as a street, as that needs to be within our 80 feet of right of way. Putting a public trail on, even though it's a public utility easement, you have all the power, gas and phone and internet and all the boxes and everything that need to go in that 10-foot PUE at every property line and along there. So then you look at where you're putting that, but now you're putting a public infrastructure on that utility easement, which essentially is saying now you're making it a permanent right of way, in my opinion, to that full extending into people's private property. So my opinion is that it stays within the 80 feet. And if we really need a 10-foot wide trail, I mean, obviously this drawing that we have here, we show a 10-foot wide trail right next to a 6-foot meandering asphalt, which I'm assuming those combined together to be, if you did that, you could take the park strip and the trail section on this drawing and stay within your 80 feet and make that 10 feet. But I would rather have some kind of landscaping along the right of way than just asphalt and a big 10-foot wide, essentially a sidewalk on the side of the road. But figuring all that out.
Doing good.
Commissioner, I think, it's a good point. And what we'd like to do is explore some additional design options and bring those back to you. I see that Tiffany's joined us. I don't know if she was able to hear some of that conversation or not.
I rarely disagree with Eric because he's so smart, but I might disagree with him on this. I think I see Mountain Road as one of the crown jewels of the city and trying to serve multiple purposes there. And I think it might justify paving over the top of an easement. I mean, I just don't know.
But my opinion, if we want to do that, then the city needs to buy that 10 feet and make it a 90-foot right of way. Not just expect that those lot owners along there have to give up 10 feet of their property for full-time public use. I'm not opposed to doing it 90 feet wide. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying to put that burden on the property owner is not fair. We already have an 80-foot right of way in there. And if we want to accommodate bikes, parking, park strips, all of those things, and then say, oh, by the way, we want a trail too, which I would like to see that, then we need to make it a 90-foot wide road and purchase that property. But again, that's only going to be in places where it's not already developed. So,
okay,
but I just don't think that should be
argument. I think
private property.
Yeah, and all we're doing is identifying the options tonight. So we'll come back with some specific recommendations that address your point, which it's a valid point.
That is a valid point.
Sure. I don't know if Tiffany had any comments she'd like to share with us.
I don't at this time, Rob.
I think commissioners, somebody aptly described this as potentially a crown jewel for this roadway. And I think that's an accurate description. And hopefully we can come up with something that both the Planning Commission and the council will feel comfortable with, and will be very much an asset to the community as it goes forward.
Well, not only that, I mean, how many other places in town are we going to have a major thoroughfare that we're going to get to actually from the ground up dictate a 1.5 miles or 2 miles stretch of, you know, even that unbuilt part of Monroe Boulevard, we only have what, a 1/2 mile there to work with, maybe, between what isn't connected. And here you probably have 2 to 3 miles of uninterrupted mountainside where this is going to go, I believe.
Yeah, it's something like that, sure.
Yeah. So
part of it is, in my opinion, it is going to be, once it's complete, I think it's going to be a used road. Meaning I don't know that I'm in favor of eliminating parking, because I feel like it will be a fairly traveled road. But looking at that as well, if you remember on the field trip, I like those planted medians. Again, if that's something, an expense that the city wants to take on to be able to maintain that for that look, you know, I think that would be great. Great, a beautiful road that we could put in. But on the field trip where we had that, you know, they didn't have any bike lanes. It was just the travel lane and then barely enough room. If you remember, we pulled off the side of the road, which might have only been a 7-foot parking area, maybe 8 feet, but I would bet, you know, somewhere around there. And so having the bike lane, if you envision what we were at, and you have a bike lane between us and the travel lane, makes that road feel good, pretty good size, even with the planted median. And if we had a planted median, then I wouldn't be opposed to maybe narrowing up that park strip to make room for, you know, it would be kind of weird, but if you ended up with let's say a 7 or 8 foot meandering trail that is within that park strip and sidewalk area, that 10 feet, it would enable you to have, you know, 1.5 to 2 feet of park strip, and in some places maybe widen out a little bit as the trail kind of curves, which would give you some vegetation between the concrete and asphalt. But added with the planted park strip, you know, that planted park strip gives the softening to the road as well. So, you know, I would be okay to give up some park strip planting if we planted the middle of it. But if we don't, you know, the places where you see those big wide roads that we already have in the city, it's a lot of asphalt. And then, so it would be nice to kind of create some of that stuff, but.
Thanks, commissioners. Anybody else have any other options that you would like us to explore?
part of me wonders if there's a way to incorporate a trail and a bike lane together. And I think you guys have spoken, anytime I've thrown ideas like this out and let them bubble up, they get shot down. So they're generally bad ideas. Okay. So with that disclaimer, I'm just wondering if there's a way to combine those two, because I agree. Part of the charm on that road we stood on in South Ogden there, what was it, Skyline Drive? Part of the charm was the fact that it wasn't a ton of asphalt, right? Like you felt like there was a lot of foliage and stuff because you were standing on grass talking. We had 15 feet of asphalt and then a median and then another 15 feet of asphalt. And I agree with Eric that adding a bike lane in there is just going to make that feel more, like a big parkway rather than, I think we'll lose charm with that. So I'm wondering, is there a way to incorporate a bike lane and an asphalt trail together? And the hillbilly in me says, heck yeah, right? Like bikes and runners can be on the same trail. The bike just kind of passes them. But, someone with more experience biking might have to chime in on that.
Brandon, if they put them together so it's just wider, You know, instead of well, you got 4 or 5 feet plus 10 feet, instead of 15 feet, just make it 10. You could do it. You could get that to work.
Like a 10-foot asphalt trail, is that what you're saying?
Right, the 10-foot asphalt trail, so that allow for walking and bicycles.
The walkers
Together.
stay over to the right and the bikes kind of pass them on the left. I don't know,
No.
maybe that's dangerous. Maybe a bike comes by at 30 miles an hour, I don't know.
It is dangerous. I'm just gonna say, because if people are walking with their kids or their dogs or even little kids on their little like training wheel bikes and stuff, they never pay attention. And if you're coming up behind, it is a crash and it is terrifying for everyone. So even if you're going decently slow, you are like paranoid the whole time that, you know, you're like trying to yell to people or use a bike bell, like coming up behind you on the left or whatever. And then people kind of startle and they almost walk into you half the time anyway. So
My thought on that, Lisa, is that when you're going downhill, you are going to be going, and this is an up downhill situation, right? There's very few places here where it's going to be flat. When you're going downhill, I mean, you're probably going to be almost up to traffic speed where you'd be out in the road, and maybe that's bad. When you're going uphill, you'd be going so slow that and maybe e-bikes change that you know, you'd be barely passing people, and it'd be pretty easy to say, hey, on your left or whatever. I go out on the Ogden River Parkway all the time and run, and bikes pass us, and it's usually not a big deal. And sometimes they're going way fast. They have a sign that says 10 miles an hour or whatever for bikes, and nobody, you know, keeps that. And maybe it's that I'm such a big dude that
Well,
hit me.
but maybe what you're talking about though is if you look at Mountain Road, for example, if we're talking about just Mountain Road, let's say that this goes into effect from 2600 north over by the Green Waste Park and all the way to where we connect to Pleasant View. If you eliminated the bike lane on the westbound traffic and combined that with a 10-foot wide asphalt trail saying bikes, and people use that from the Green Waste Park all the way to where it connects to Pleasant View is all uphill. So naturally your bikes are going to be going slower. And then on the eastbound traffic side, we do put a bike lane because that's all downhill. And so that has a bike lane that's out in the street for that faster traffic. And those could be some things we could look at. I think if it's all uphill on a bike, you're really not going to be going all that too fast that you couldn't share a trail. But, you know, I don't walk on the trails and I don't bike on them. So
you're one person and you're like, I'm staying to the right. I get it. But people do not think half the time. And I don't mean that as a put down. They don't think, I mean, they're like talking and they're like, oh, you know, and their kid veers out. It's just like so unpredictable. If it was all just like one person that were older and I would bike on the street still if the street's wide enough, if there's clumps of people on it.
Yeah, but we're not talking about making a big wide street here.
Right. So
Yeah, I'm kind of with Lisa. I'm a little uncomfortable with sharing that trail with bikes and people, because I think it is going to be heavily used potentially with even e-bikes or, you know, people commuting on bikes that are, you know, cooking through there. But I wonder if there's any leeway on the width of the parking lanes. Is there any leeway on that, Kai, to shorten those parking lanes up to gain a little bit of width to fit in that asphalt trail?
Yes, Commissioner Carroll, this rendering shows 12-foot travel lanes, and I think the parking is 8.5 feet.
8.5 on each side.
Yeah,
Which
there may
seems
be
wide.
Yeah, there may be a little bit of room. I wouldn't say much though.
Okay. We may not need to gain a whole lot to keep that bike lane and still have the asphalt trail within the 80 feet.
well, and I think that's it. If we've decided that bikes and people aren't going to share that, then do we need a 10-foot wide trail? And, you know, and that would be Tiffany, I guess what's the the recommendation to ask for a 10-foot wide trail. Was the intent to have that be shared, or?
Sorry, I was having troubles with my mute button. So we would rather not a 10-foot trail. We would like to have a 6-foot asphalt trail for walking. And then I also just would make the recommendation that you do not have your bikes and your pedestrians share right away.
Even, and does that recommendation even for uphill sections?
Yes, that's for any section on a road.
I'm not disagreeing. I'd like your input, because in my head, it's different for uphill, downhill, and times are a changing, and I have seen people on e-bikes that it's almost like a little motorcycle, right? They're very swift still uphill. So
Yes, I would say that's the same both for uphill and downhill.
Okay, any other mentions for discussion for Rob and Kai to kind of prepare something or some options? Is everybody of the general feeling yay or nay? Let's talk about a planted median. If we were to take a poll right now on the rest of Mountain Road, how many would say they would like to see a planted median?
That was nice.
So
That we saw the other day.
yeah, everything's an opportunity cost, right? The planted median means you have less real estate for what we're
Well,
talking
what
about.
would
lights
have
and
to
stuff.
be taken away if you would go with an option like that?
Well, right now as the road, I'm just talking like if, not really give and take, if, there's going to be a median in the middle of the road. So do we want to say, hey, yeah, let's spend the money to have that be planted median?
Okay.
We're asking for, hey, this is our wish list, like what we want to see. When it comes to a planted median, because that's going to be a cost to the city, not only to install, but to maintain for the future, that's probably going to really defer to council.
Where it says center turn lane, you're saying just maybe, well, you'd obviously have outlets so people can still turn, but the one nice thing, they're way, way prettier. So I'm for it completely in that sense. But the only other thing about having the lane open in the middle for turning and so forth is when you do have bikers or you have cars, people can veer over farther and go around and give people space. But you can't as much when you have obviously cement and stuff there.
Lisa, I actually think that's a benefit. I think what you've described is a behavior that the police would like to cease, right? Like if you take 2600 for years and years, someone turns left, hey, you just pass them on the right. Well, there's not a sidewalk there, and anymore there's so many little kids on scooters and stuff there that's an accident waiting to happen when you dart around like that.
Yeah, it's like more of a safety measure.
But the 2600, the street is almost very conducive to it because it's wide in places, and it just feels like, oh, I can just zip around these guys. And so our building a street that doesn't allow that, I don't necessarily see that as a negative, really. Like, yeah, you're gonna have to brake and you're gonna have to wait for that guy to turn left.
It's a little more safe to not have the median, but it's way, way prettier to have it. But the other nice thing we already have going is it really does parallel the mountains and all that. So it's still pretty, even if you don't do a median, a pretty median like that.
And we can't just sit here and pretend that it's free, right? I mean, it obviously, not only does it cost us real estate, but it costs us maintaining it, right? Because the Boy Scouts aren't going to go out there and mow the lawn every week and weed eat and plant flowers and stuff like that. Maybe a little bit, but so then the question is, does it give us a positive ROI? And I think it does. I think things like that just enhance the surrounding vicinity so much that it makes it worth the city's time and effort, and money to mow it and stuff, in my opinion. I think it would raise the values around there so much that I think it's worth it. I think it's a worthwhile venture. My opinion. Could be, you guys may differ.
Okay.
You know, those middle medians that we saw up above the university the other day, I can't remember the name of that road, but it doesn't seem like they had elaborate like grass and all that. It seemed like there were trees in there, maybe bushes and stuff that were nice, but maybe there's, you know, some more low maintenance vegetation options that, you know, might keep some of that,
You know, I thought about that too, but I
maintenance
think-
cost and time down.
I think you really have to be careful with bushes and stuff there, because like Lisa was saying, well, you still need to see, you need to be able to see when you're making a left-hand turn, right? You need to be able to see traffic in both directions. So it's not like you can put a big hedgerow down the middle of it, right? I mean, because then you've got a sight barrier. It's a safety problem.
There is a grass you can plant that's called fescue. It only has to be mowed every couple of weeks, only watered maybe every couple of weeks. Very drought resistant. That may work in something like that.
Yeah, it's true. It's not like people want to go lay on it, right? In the middle of a parkway. So,
Well, you hope not.
if this was Germany, man, they would for sure. I can tell you stories. Once it's
Okay,
75
so it
degrees
seems like we're kind of in favor of a planted median. That would be a nice would be nice things. Seems like we're already in favor of bike lanes, and so really it comes down to figuring out a way to incorporate the trail sidewalk, you know, combo, whatever, along one side of the road. So I feel like that gives staff direction to kind of get some ideas. Rob, Kai, does that give you guys kind of what you're looking for tonight?
So
Yeah, I think that's going to be helpful. And as we put these together, we'll be coordinating with both Tiffany and Lauren to make sure that we address some of the comments that have been made as far as practicality and safety.
Okay. I wouldn't mind seeing, I mean, what the city council's opinion is on a planted median, saying, yeah, the city's willing to take that expense, or, you know, hey, yeah, we want that trail and we're going to buy the another 10 feet, or, you know, it's easy for all of us to say, yeah, we want all this stuff, but at what cost? And at the end of the day, you know, nobody's going to want a planted median up there that in 5 years is garbage because the city hasn't dedicated the funds to take care of it, or plants keep dying and we don't want to replace them. And, you know, that doesn't happen elsewhere in our city, which I don't think it would there, but because they make a commitment, then they'll keep it. But
Well,
that's the commitment that does have to be made.
You talk about a little controversy to put in a medium like that, that's going to cost a lot of money. They can't even figure out a way to get a park done.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think one of the things that we're going to look at is it actually a savings with respect to the planted median versus the expense of asphalt. And there may be some design features. We have the LID swale on the south side, just simply because of the topography and what have you, but potentially the center turn lane, the median in that potentially could be used as part of the storm drainage that goes along with that as well. So I think there's lots of things that we can explore to hopefully make it a win-win for not just a one-time expense thing with ongoing maintenance, but that the project as a whole actually benefits from the design.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll leave it in your guys' hands to take us to the next step.
Well, thanks, commissioners. That's a real healthy discussion tonight.
Thank you. All right. Next on our agenda, any planning commission comments? We do need to fill a seat. I know we only have a few of us here tonight on the general plan steering committee, as Commissioner Waite has been relieved. So is there anybody on the commission tonight that would like to volunteer for that? Do we want to talk about that when we have the rest of the commissioners with us?
Let's talk about it later. All of us are here.
Okay.
In other words, no volunteers.
No volunteer. We can volunteer. We'll
All right.
volunteer those who
You want to
to.
volunteer one of the two that's not here?
Yeah, we'll volunteer one of those.
Both of them would do good.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Any other comments from
Yeah,
commissioners?
one comment quick. I'd like to consider maybe adding something to our opening meeting statement that helps the public, and just for the public, just, I'm interested in wrapping this up soon too. But, and just so you know, we're interested in hearing your comments and stuff, for sure. I just want everyone to know that. And I take every one of them seriously, even when I don't agree. I take every one of them seriously. I think about them, all that kind of stuff. But I'd like to maybe, for the planning commission, maybe look at adding something to our opening meeting statement that would help the public, maybe, because I put myself in their shoes, and especially where you have a chat feature, it seems so easy to ask questions and things like that. And even when they were at the pulpit, people would come up and ask us questions that we can't answer, or we shouldn't answer. We don't know the answer to. Sometimes they're unreasonable questions. Not tonight's weren't, right? But they could ask us all these questions, and you feel like, oh, they're the public, and we need to answer them. So I'm thinking about adding something to our opening meeting statement that helps the public maybe be more effective in addressing us, to say, please have a statement prepared opposed to questions if you can. And sometimes people use questions rhetorically to get us to think, and I understand all that. But and also when we call for public comment, like tonight we had some chats coming in that were a little after the fact, because it takes time to type those things up, and I don't think they were cohesive with the flow of our conversation and stuff. So I think we should encourage people to, when possible, raise their hand and address us. And when we do that, ask for statements as opposed to questions, because we may not all agree and we may not have the answers and stuff. So I think I'd like a little bit of a maybe addition to our opening meeting statement to help us interface with the public more, especially now that we have a chat feature. And that doesn't sound like it's going away for a while, right? And so
Yeah.
Anyway.
I would agree. But also I am in favor of, do we need to continue? I love the healthy conversation and the opportunities that brings up with everybody, but also I do want to adhere or honor as much as we can our rules of public engagement. When we require a project or something comes through, requires a public hearing, that's really the time that is designated for the public to share and comment and things. And then when we have something come through, it has a public hearing, and then it's on the agenda 3 more times for their normal approval process. When we open up for public every time, it's as though there's a public hearing every time that thing's on the agenda, when in reality, sometimes I feel like it can do a disservice to the applicant, because they feel like every time they come to an agenda, they got to be prepared to answer questions and interact with public when they've done that already once. And so, but it's finding that happy medium, it's, engaging in every item, or if we feel like if that's continued and healthy the way we do it, which I think that it is. But I also want to recognize that sometimes to the applicants, it does catch them off guard, and they're not prepared for comments or things that go that way, because they didn't come up when their item did have a public hearing. And so they've spent all this time and money and effort to move forward. And now public all of a sudden has comment that may be different than what they already kind of had direction towards. So
I agree with you about the specific thing tonight, specifically, for sure, on that.
Yeah.
I'm just, if somebody, let's say, emailed us all, just even a thought, maybe it doesn't even pertain to anything we're talking about. Maybe they want to talk about Monroe Boulevard or something, and they were to send us an email, we'd read those over. We may even read them in our meeting, right? And so we have this feature that's so easy to use, the chat, right? And so maybe we ought to just add something that says, if you choose to use the chat, because it's there, right? Your comments may or may not be noticed by the commissioners in the meeting, and we can't guarantee that they will be addressed. We can read them as a public comment in the next meeting, something like that, because we're engaged here, we're talking, we're looking at technical diagrams sometimes, and somebody may put a valid point in the chat, and we may not catch it. And I just feel like, well, if we're going to give people a tool to interface with us, we ought to at least address maybe how it should be used, effectively.
And Commissioner Mason, what we like to do is when it's appropriate for comments to be made, like when people can raise hands, we turn the chat on. And when that time has passed, we turn the chat off so that you're not getting the chat coming in during your feature.
Yeah.
And, so that tonight we missed that a little bit, but it's not, I didn't explain it the way that we do it in Planning Commission because it's a little different than council. And so I think that's, in the future, we'll be a little bit better on the timing so that when it's a chat, it's coming in at the right time so that commission can talk about it as if it was a public comment.
Okay. Well, even the chat, a lot of the comments like tonight we're talking about the road and then some good ideas are coming, hey, what about a 6-foot trail and 4 feet here, right? Those are valid comments to that, but I can't promise the public that I can read them and, and we're having the discussion here, right? Or they may be read after the fact, something like that. So it does become difficult, and I don't know. I'm just interested in receiving that input, but not necessarily feeling like we have to engage with it during the meeting always. I don't know. Somehow we have to balance that out where, we have an outreach to people, because we represent them, right? I don't know.
Brandon, you're talking about that chat feature. It's nice to read them. But sometimes we get a discussion going, we can't have the public constantly interrupting our discussion when it's not the appropriate time to do so.
But put yourself in their shoes. That doesn't feel like an interruption when you're writing a comment on a thread, right? I don't think any of our comments tonight were meant to interrupt. I think they were meant to be, hey, here's a thought for your discussion. And,
I agree, but sometimes you have to have some rules of procedures.
Sure.
Otherwise it gets out of control and it can go on forever.
Well, that's what I'm suggesting is that we have some rules wrapped around it. Because right now we have a chat that's open without a lot of direction on how to use it.
Right. That's true.
We just
I think what you're saying is during the time for public comment or when the public is invited to speak, the chat feature will be turned on for Zoom, and when that time is over, it will be turned off, so you will not be able to chat. So then we're just notifying them that. So because the same thing, we don't want public to get frustrated. Hey, I'm trying to make a comment what you guys are talking about, and I can't do it. It's like, well, that would be like them just speaking out loud in the middle of our meeting, too.
Right. Except it's not though, because it's digital and it takes time to write it up. And maybe we ought to disable the chat and just ask for. I don't know. Like I said, any of the comments that were made tonight could have been emailed to us, and it wouldn't. We would have handled that somehow, but we don't know what to do with chat. I guess is.
Well, I think it's that if the chat's turned on and your chat happened to not get read, but any chats that are put in there while the chat feature is on will be noted in the minutes or in the record. So if we miss one, at least it's there.
Okay, and maybe we try to read them when it's on. We try to say, we try to read them in the meeting and say, hey, we had a public comment come in at this. We read it. If it's asked a question, same thing as if a person asks a question, we can or don't have to answer it, but at least that comment, that input would be noted in our meeting. Maybe. Again, I think out loud here, guys. So not all my ideas are good.
Before tonight, I haven't really noticed that that's been an issue. So I don't know if you guys have, but it sounds like what John Call just said is that normally they do like turn it off and on at the appropriate times. It's just that maybe it wasn't done. They kind of missed it tonight. And that may be why we really noticed it a little more tonight. So if they just have that as a procedure, I haven't noticed it until tonight. I haven't noticed it being an issue before.
I've noticed it a number of times.
Oh, have you?
Again, and I hope our commenter isn't taking personal offense to this, because I thought he was using the feature as I would have done as part of the public, right? Which is, hey, there's a place they're asking for chat, right? But I've noticed the same thing throughout it. And so, in the times when we're not even open for public comment, we've seen all sorts of, and I can think, Aaron Christensen has made a lot of comments through the chat and stuff like that. And I just wrestle with how to address those at times. You know. So I don't know. I'm thinking about maybe, and John, maybe you can just ponder this or something, but maybe add in a line or two to our opening meeting statement that addresses maybe more specifically how we can be effective with that. That would be my recommendation. I don't have a great answer for you.
I've got that listed and we'll put something together for you.
Okay.
Hey, any other comments from commissioners? All right, how about planning?
I've got a couple things for you. The first one is that I have received some communication from Cami Marriott's representatives regarding the sensitive lands amendment. And I have a meeting set up with them for I think it's next Thursday. So it's going to be, we'll see how extensive their comments are. We're certainly trying to get this on this next agenda on the 21st. So we'll see how that all unfolds. Secondly, is that we are making good progress with respect to our land use code rewrite. The first two sections are almost done. And as soon as we have those ready, we're not going to wait till the entire code is done to start distributing that to you. So the first section is really the administrative section. The second one starts talking about design processes and those kinds of things. So hopefully we'll get those to you here shortly. That's what I have for you.
Okay. Brandon or Kai, do you have anything with this tonight?
I should mention one other thing, and that is that our new planning director, Scott Hess, is going to be starting on May 10th. And so you might note that my April 1st announcement has come and gone. So
April Fools, you're staying.
I'm staying till it looks like May 4th.
To the May Fools. Okay. As Brandon would say, may the 4th be with you, huh? That's when you're leaving.
I'll still be around to help.
Okay. Kai, Brandon, anything from you guys?
Yes, thank you for your time last week at the field trip. It was really helpful.
Yeah, I think that was good. All right, John, anything from you?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned one of them, which was good, the adding another person to the committee for the general plan. Also, we are starting to come up with a plan or starting to do in-person meetings again. So they will be limited in attendance and people will still be able to participate via Zoom, commissioners and the public. But we will be back in the council meeting and spreading out and trying to accommodate an in-person meeting as well. So just look forward to additional details on that. We're going to start with the council next week and make sure it's going good, and then branch out to the other groups. So that's what I've got.
All right, thank you. All right, motion to adjourn.
Have we adjourn?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor for adjournment?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It's in time to watch the Jazz game.
A little late.
Aye.
Bye.
Okay, see you guys.
See ya.
Good night.